5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening and welcome. I'm your host, Pearson Sharp, in for Liz Wheeler. This is Tipping Point. Tonight, things continue to get worse for the leadership of the Women's March. After allegations of anti-Semitism, we're starting to see events canceled and state organizations dissolve entirely. The Women's March would like you to believe that's due to a lack of volunteers and funding, but we'll tell you the truth with Jenna Ellis coming up shortly. Then another child has tragically died at the custody of Border Control as more migrants come across our southern border. I'll tell you why, despite what the left believes, this is not the fault of our Border Control agents later in the show. Plus, the latest on the Israeli elections as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calls for an early election. Former Israeli Defense Force soldier Mika Danzig joins us later to give us all of the breaking details. And we will also be talking about President Trump's visit to Iraq, where he met with troops and thanked them for all their hard work in the war on terror. The left instead wants to focus on the fact that President Trump signed MAGA hats that belong to the soldiers at the base. We'll tell you why all of that is nonsense and more coming up. But first, as always, thanks for being here tonight, because our nation is at a tipping point. If we don't turn America towards liberty, then we risk losing the freedom that makes America exceptional. And that brings us to our first tipping point tonight. Tensions are rising for the Women's March and its leadership. The Chicago Women's March, scheduled for January 19th as part of a number of other marches happening across the country, has been canceled in light of the accusations of anti-Semitic views of some of the group's national leadership, namely Tamika Mallory and Linda Sarsour. The Chicago organizers said they would be holding another kind of event in honor of the annual march, but the timing of their cancellation doesn't bode well for the organization as a whole. Marches have also been canceled in Nevada and Portland, and one of the founders of the Women's March has come forward condemning the anti-Semitism of Mallory and Sarsour. Is this the beginning of the end for the Women's March? Joining me now is Director, Dobson Policy Center, Jenna Ellis. Jenna, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Pearson.
So this group began 2 years ago as an effort to oppose President Trump, springing out of a hate for our president and from a lot of hateful people. These people, they just want to blame. They want to blame Trump. They want to blame each other. They want to even blame Jews for their problems. So is it surprising that we're seeing this kind of hateful rhetoric coming out of a group like this?
It's not really surprising when the progressive left is increasingly about identity politics. And what identity politics tells us is that people care more about what groups and associations that you belong to, and even things like innate physical characteristics that actually promote ageism, sexism, racism, and ultimately discrimination. And so while the left proclaims tolerance, and this is supposedly about all women, we saw even last year and the year previously that they excluded pro-life women. They're now excluding Jewish women, and they're excluding people who don't fit with their notion of whatever groups they belong to. So really, this is now just imploding in over itself, which is what the entire progressive left's agenda really is all about. It's about saying that we want to identify with specific groups and we want to hate others.
So in a way, they're kind of eating themselves alive with this sort of rhetoric.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, it really isn't all about women, and it's not about promoting women. It's not about true, genuine equality. It's about saying that we want our agenda to move forward, and we want to hate specifically against certain religious beliefs, certain religions, and certain women who hold to those particular beliefs. And so while they claim to be tolerant, tolerance has to be a two-way street. And if we understand what the notion of equality really is in the context of our American society, the reason that we have the First Amendment and fundamental freedoms of speech, association, free exercise of religion is because the Constitution allows us to disagree peaceably, to have those conversations, and to ultimately decide for ourselves what we believe about truth, what we believe about God, and be able to have those conversations without having that specific type of rhetoric and hatred that actually is promulgated by the left.
Okay, going a little bit more into that. This isn't the first time that the Women's March has courted controversy. I mean, they've made headlines a number of times before. Last month, two of its founders actually harassed a Jewish woman, saying that she was responsible for exploiting the black and brown people of America, and quote that the Jews were actually responsible for propagating the slave trade in America. What's your response to that?
Yeah, well, first, I mean, that's just patently absurd, but also to then lump someone into a specific category and then say that they are guilty for the offenses of an entire class is, again, about identity politics. And so this is where we see that the Christian worldview, which is actually what our nation was founded upon, the idea that we can all be free to associate, have freedom of religion, are not compelled to believe in God, but can speak the truth about God and can decide for ourselves. The Christian worldview is actually the only one that recognizes that these innate characteristics, being male versus female, whatever race, nationality, or origin you are, those are innate characteristics that we shouldn't discriminate against because all human beings are made in the image of God. And so the progressive left doesn't understand that. They want to play these identity politics, and they want to tell us that we are responsible for everything that our ancestors might have done, that our race, that our religion may have done wrongly in the past, but then somehow we're not responsible for our own actions as individuals. So again, they have this disconnect with reality, and they want to have their truth, meaning that there isn't any objective basis in fact. It's all just about their agenda and discrimination and promulgating their truth, which is outside of reality.
Right, and as you can see, that kind of truth that they have, that their own objective reality that they create, comes around and bites them when it comes up against other identity politics. So we've obviously seen anti-Semitic views from the Women's March, but at the same time, they condemn groups like the Nation of Islam for saying anti-Semitic things. So where's the disconnect there? What is the actual agenda of a group like this?
Yeah, well, it's very selective. And so if you fit into their specific notion of identity politics, which could change tomorrow, then you're accepted into the group. But if you believe other things or you have other views, like on life, like on religion, like even on politics, as a conservative woman who's pro-life and works for an organization that is specifically for freedom of religion and other things that are specifically conservative, I'm not welcome at the Women's March. And so, so we don't even know day to day what the left really wants from this, other than to exclude anything that they don't personally accept. So it becomes a very subjective standard, and this is why day to day, year to year, we don't have an objective measurable difference between right and wrong, or what's tolerable or intolerable according to the left. That's why our nation was founded upon an objective rule of law, an objective morality, which is pre-political. It comes from being human beings made in the image of God, and we have a morality that's derived from our divine lawgiver. And so if we understand that as an objective source of measurement, then we can have consistency. But groups like the progressive left and the Women's March don't have that, and so it's completely subjective based on their feelings and their truth, whatever it happens to be day to day. And that's just not sustainable, not only for an organization like the Women's March, but especially when you have to have consistency and objectivity in the rule of law.
Okay, so we have a group like the Women's March who claims to have sprung out of a need for representing women's rights and representing the rights of people who are vulnerable. But then you have them coming out and saying things like this, very, very hateful things. Is this actually just a thinly veiled hate group? Are they just promulgating these beliefs to promote their hateful agenda?
Well, I don't think we really know what their ultimate goal and objective is. I mean, we see that there are so many different groups that march against things, but we don't know what they're actually for. And so the progressive left, we know that their identity politics are what matters, and I think that their actual goal is to break down the authority structure of the rule of law in American society. We've seen them attack the traditional family. We've seen them break down marriage, which is between one man and one woman. We've seen them break down all of those things that comprise the pre-political understanding and the biological differences between men and women and the family. We've seen them leave the church. They reject any sort of religion that doesn't go along with their feelings. And so now they're left only with the civil government as the source of authority. And so when you get someone like President Trump, who is now at the head of the American civil government in the chief executive office, then they have so much hatred and attack back for him, because that's the last system of legitimacy that they will actually recognize. And so that's why we've seen them go to court and go and try to have the activist judges in the Supreme Court to try to recognize things like same-sex marriage, like so-called women's rights, like so-called right to choice and abortion. And they're going through the court system because that to the left is the last measurable source of legitimacy to be able to go along with their actions. And so when they've broken down the family and the church structure, then now they're attacking the civil government because it's not giving them what they want, which is really the opportunity to just do whatever they want without any system of accountability, responsibility, or authority.
Okay, Jenna, thank you very much. Really appreciate you being here. All right, don't go anywhere. We have Deanna Lorraine here next to discuss the left's reaction to President Trump's visit to Iraq yesterday. Hit me up on Twitter at Pearson Sharp over the break, and we'll see you in a minute.
Hi, thank you so much. Sorry, I'm not in my typical studio. I'm still at my parents' house till tomorrow, so the lighting might be not as good.
Our News on Terror segment tonight. Yesterday afternoon, President Trump took a surprise visit to the troops stationed in Iraq. During his visit, he thanked the troops for their bravery in the ongoing war against terrorism and making significant strides in defeating ISIS. Watch this.
The other reason I'm here today is to personally thank you and every service member throughout this region for the near elimination of the ISIS territorial caliphate in Iraq and in Syria. 2 years ago, when I became president, they were a very dominant group. They were very dominant. Today, they're not so dominant anymore. Great job. I looked at a map, and 2 years ago, it was a lot of red all over that map. And now you have a couple little spots, and that's happening very quickly. That's happening very quickly. You'll be seeing that. I want to just say great job. And we'll be watching ISIS very closely in mind. We came to Al-Assad to share our eternal gratitude for everything you do to keep America safe, strong, and free.
A rousing speech. But instead of focusing on his speech, mainstream media outlets like CNN would rather focus on soldiers bringing MAGA hats for Trump to sign. With me now, Republican strategist Deanna Lorraine. Deanna, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, so break it down for me here. Let's go over the outrage. Our troops are getting in trouble for supporting their commander-in-chief. The leader of the military, they're literally being harassed for supporting the leader of the military. Is that what's happening here?
You can't make this stuff up if you tried. And that's what's so scary. You know, people are so concerned with hating Trump in America, with causing divisiveness, that they were going to say that the troops are in trouble for supporting our president and for having MAGA hats signed by the president when the president flies out to these dangerous conditions to visit his troops, his beloved troops. And to me, that's really sick and sad. You know, the left constantly says that Trump is the divider in chief. Trump is not the divider. It's the left that constantly divides this country and pits the veterans against their own president. And no one cares more about our president, about our veterans, and the well-being and safety of them, and to appreciate them than our president that we have right now, President Trump.
Exactly. I mean, how dare they? How dare these troops who are putting their lives on the line actually be proud to meet their commander-in-chief? What were they supposed to do? When Trump comes to visit them, what was their response? What should their response have been?
The left would love for them to boo him. The left would love for them to say, hey, don't show up. You know, thanks for traveling all this way, but don't come. You know, we're hanging out. We're shutting the door on you. That's what the left, I think, would secretly love. What kind of a message does that send to the rest of the world when they want us to be so divided and we want to mock our president? And B, what kind of a message does that send to our country? United we stand, divided we fall. And it seems like the left only wants us divided and fighting against our own president. And it's just despicable to me, especially at Christmas, right? With the one time of the year where we would love to just be united as a country, and the left wants nothing but to create more division. It's very sad.
Right, exactly, it is. So first, they come across and they attack President Trump for not, being there with the troops. And then when he actually goes and does it, they've kind of run out of ammunition. So, they turn on the troops and attack them instead.
It's so sad. I mean, that's their mindset right now. That's why I can't believe anyone would be for the left at this point in time. And really, no one has done more for the troops and for our veterans than this president. The president constantly acknowledges them, constantly appreciates them. You know, he's working to have better, improved equipment. He's strengthening and bolstering the military after a very weakened military experience under Obama's leadership. And he's reforming the veterans' care so that they can get better care when they come out and be appreciated like the heroes that they are. So it's just despicable to me all around. And we can see right now they show their true colors, who the real dividers of this country are.
So you mentioned Obama's leadership. Let's look at that for a second. How was he treated in these sorts of situations? Because, he visited troops and stuff as well. How did the media handle him when he went and visited troops and they showed their support?
Well, they showed their support, too. I mean, they're respectful of him for the most part. No matter who's in office, most of the troops are going to be respectful when the president goes and visits them. And that's the right thing to do.
So, of course, it was Jim Acosta who brought all this to the forefront.
Good old Jim.
Yeah, exactly. Asking if the troops were out of line and even suggesting that maybe they should be disciplined for showing this kind of support for the president. And then, the other CNN talking heads jumped on board as well and suggested that Trump was just using them as political pawns for a photo op. Is that what's happening here?
Yeah, that is what's happening. And leave it to CNN and their gang of race baiters and dividers to say something like that and to turn something that was a beautiful moment into something horrific in their mind and something that to be shamed. President Trump also, he acknowledged and called out a number of different squadrons and their leaders and gave thanks to very many specific thanks and gratitude to many specific people while he was out there. It wasn't just a photo opportunity. It was a beautiful, uplifting, motivating speech that really recharged them and gave them energy for being out there. So shame on them for saying that is a shameful act. How dare they support their own president?
Exactly. All right. Thank you for being with us. Okay, you have 1 minute to tweet me at Pearson Sharp before we're back with Mika Danzig to discuss all the breaking details of the upcoming Israeli election. See you in a minute. Welcome back. Our Around the World story tonight, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition party dissolved the country's parliament on December 24th, calling for an early general election to take place in April. The Prime Minister is facing mounting pressure and currently under investigation for legal troubles, but still seems to be the popular leader among contenders. Will Netanyahu's be re-elected, and why the rush for early elections? With me to break this down, former IDF soldier Mika Danzig. Mika, did I say that right?
You said that perfectly. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
So, what's going on here? Why the early elections?
Well, you know, there was a lot of talk that there would be an early election right after Avigdor Lieberman, the recently departed defense minister, left Netanyahu's coalition after the ceasefire, the last ceasefire with Hamas. Avigdor Lieberman, his departure from the coalition government that currently has been in power in Israel for almost 4 years, left that coalition with a very slim one-person majority in Israel's parliament, the Knesset, 61 seats total. And it does make it very difficult to govern. So that was, you know, something that a lot of people thought would happen, that there would be an early election then. But Netanyahu avoided it. A lot of people think because he this July would end up being Israel's longest prime minister since its founding prime minister, Ben-Gurion, that he wanted to hold off until then. But there's a great deal of speculation that the real reason for calling these early elections now is that over the last couple of weeks, it's come out that the Attorney General is looking at potentially indicting or the possibility of indicting Netanyahu. And Netanyahu's looking to have an election that is essentially a popular consensus of his candidacy and him continuing as prime minister that would perhaps operate as a bulwark against a potential indictment by the Attorney General.
And do you think that's likely? Do you think that Israel will have a new prime minister by April?
Well, currently the polls show that the Likud party, which is Netanyahu's party, is still the most popular party. If there were an election held today, Netanyahu and his party would win. He'd be in a position to be asked by the president of the country to form the next coalition government, as he has many times in the past. But of course, as everybody knows in American politics, 3 months is a lifetime. And there is a up-and-coming candidate who just declared his new party, the Israel Resilience Party, he's calling it, named Benny Gantz. And Benny Gantz was the 3 years ago retired from being Israel's chief of staff, its highest-ranking military officer. And he is that shiny new object, very popular in the Israeli political world, very popular among the people. He's also, there have been talk of him forming running on a platform with Israel's former defense minister, a name Moshe Ayalon, Bougie, popularly called Bougie Ayalon. And if they form a party together or run on some platform together, it's a possibility that they could be that fly in the ointment for Netanyahu's plans.
So what are the ramifications for America's foreign policy in the Middle East after this election? It seems like it's kind of a shakeup. And as you know, Israel helps direct a lot of America's foreign policy. They work together very closely on a lot of issues. What do you think could happen with this shakeup?
Well, I mean, it remains to be seen if there will be a shakeup. Certainly in the short term, the Trump peace plan that was announced that was going to be shared with the parties in the Palestinian Authority and at the Israeli government, that appears to have been put on hold. It'll be interesting to see, I think Trump will continue to keep that on hold. The Trump administration doesn't want that to impact the election in Israel. And, it doesn't look like, as long as the Israeli public views that there is no partner for peace, and there certainly is no partner for peace on the Palestinian Authority side, it doesn't look like the far left of center parties in Israel, including the Labor Party, really have a chance in this election. So it's either going to be a continuation of a government led by Bibi Netanyahu, most likely, or again, on the outside chance, Benny Gantz and Moshe Ayalon, their joint list party, so to speak, their joint party together could end up, coming around the side, so to speak, and changing things pretty dramatically.
So Netanyahu has gotten into a little bit of trouble recently. I mean, made headlines a few times. How much of an issue is corruption in this case? Is that the primary factor behind these elections? Is Netanyahu just trying to find a more favorable government?
Well, certainly a cynical perspective on this would be that the possibility of these indictments coming down, and the Attorney General in Israel has not decided yet to indict. He's been given all of the case files, so to speak, and a recommendation for indictment by the investigators, by the police, but he hasn't made a decision on indictment. But certainly a cynical perspective would be that that's the main reason why Netanyahu has pushed for this election to happen on April 9th. A less cynical perspective would be that it's become very difficult to govern. The ostensible reason for the decision by the Knesset, the parliament, to dissolve this current government and hold these early elections in April, and it's not that early. The elections were going to take place in November of 2019, but it's still slightly early. And the ostensible reason was that the parties deadlocked, the political parties deadlocked on a vote with respect to the conscription for military service of the ultra-Orthodox, what's called the Haredi draft bill vote, which the Israeli Supreme Court had said had to happen by January 15th. The fact that that could not happen, that with a governing coalition of only 61 individuals in a 120-seat parliament, Netanyahu couldn't get that Haredi or ultra-Orthodox draft bill passed, is what was given as the actual, quote, excuse for having these early elections. But again, most people in the Israeli political scene feel it was the potential of these pending indictments.
Micha, thank you very much for being here tonight. We appreciate it.
Oh, happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Our next tipping point tonight, another migrant child has tragically died at our southern border. The left wants to blame this all on the Border Patrol, but I'll explain to you why that is actually false. Stick with us. That's straight ahead. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Pearson Sharp in for Liz Wheeler tonight. Our State of the U.S. story tonight, very tragically, another migrant child has died in the custody of Border Patrol this month. It's honestly very sad, but I have a few problems with the story. Naturally, everyone is outraged. How could we let this happen? How could the U.S. sit by and watch as children are literally dying under our watch? Well, here's the problem. This isn't America's responsibility. This is the responsibility of these negligent parents. Parents who put their children in extremely dangerous situations, in situations where, as we can see, they may die. It's very sad, don't get me wrong, but we're putting the blame in the wrong place. First of all, the child was released from the hospital after becoming ill crossing the border. We already know there are tons of diseases and illnesses in these migrant camps. They're full of them, and they're bringing them with them into the U.S., diseases we haven't had here for decades. And amazingly, the Democrats are forcing agents to release these migrants, bringing disease and crime into our communities, like in El Paso, where over 400 have been released so far. Is that fair to them, to these communities? So more than likely, that's where this child contracted the illness, after being dragged there by his parents. And let's not forget, these migrants are committing a crime by coming here illegally. It's illegal. It's against the law, and they're doing it anyways. Not only that, but they're taking their children along for the ride. If there was a family in America, American citizens, and they decided to march with their infant children across the country, breaking into buildings and forcing their children to sleep outside in the cold while they committed crimes, they would have their children taken away and be put in jail for child endangerment. That's child abuse, plain and simple. But because they're migrants, in this case, and not American citizens, somehow we have to feel sorry for them while they're committing these crimes and abusing their children. If you climbed Mount Everest and brought your child along and that child died, it wouldn't be Nepal's fault. It would be yours. But the Democrats want these people coming in. The Democrats want hordes of migrants coming into California and Texas and everywhere else so the Democrats can get them registered and get them voting. What kind of people are coming over? Do the Democrats even care? Do we have doctors and scientists and lawyers scaling the fence illegally? Like President Trump said, not only are they not sending their best, but we just found out over 63% of migrants who come to America end up on welfare. I did the math, and that comes to about 54 million people. Now, if America's population is about 340 million, that's a little over 1/6 of the people in America on welfare. And that's just the migrants, not including everyone else. How does that affect the economy, affect the well-being of the average American? Are these people who can contribute to America? It doesn't matter. This is the problem with the bleeding heart philosophy, is that it only works from a distance. As soon as you try to put it into practice, people, innocent people, children who have no say in the matter or what their parents do, start getting hurt, start dying. But of course, that doesn't fit the agenda. That doesn't match the media narrative. It's a cycle. And blaming the parents for abusing their own children isn't part of that story. Our next tipping point. A male student in Mizzou is being charged with sexual harassment after asking another student on a date back in the spring of 2016. How are people supposed to meet each other if you're not even allowed to ask for consent now? We have Brandon Morse with us next to break it all down. Stick with us. That's straight ahead.
Can you still hear me okay? 1, 2.
For our politically incorrect story tonight, we have yet another crazy story coming out of a liberal campus. This time, a male student at Mizzou is being charged with sexual harassment after asking another student on a date back in the spring of 2016. Imagine that. The school's Title IX code claims that because the defendant was physically larger than the female student, that places him in a position of power and authority. So now, not only can you be charged for asking for consent, you can now also be judged upon your physical characteristics. What's next? I mean, what do liberals want? How are people supposed to meet each other if you're not even allowed to ask for consent now? Vocally asking for consent, the thing that liberals have demanded and campaigned for, has become a problem. So where do we go from here? With me now to get to the bottom of this, front page editor of the Red State and host of the Morse Code at mojo50.com, Brandon Morse. Brandon, thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so this Mizzou student asked out his dance fitness instructor on a date. And now he's accused of violating school policy because he was deemed to be in a position of power and authority due to his physical size. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, man. It's funny that you said I'm going to try to get down to the bottom of it. I don't think it is possible to get down to the bottom of this craziness. I've got to tell you, man, to me, this kind of reeks of an agenda, a narrative that they are consistent. The feminist social justice left is consistently trying to perpetuate on the people. Basically, what they're trying to say is men in any way, shape, or form are danger. They are dangerous, and anything that they do is dangerous, no matter how innocent it is, such as asking a girl out on a date. The reason that they want to have this narrative around is so that they can say, well, look, men, having them being able to do whatever they want, make decisions, without the purview or without us saying that they can, is too dangerous. What we need to do is have a controlled atmosphere where everything that we say goes, and our narrative can flourish, and our agenda flourishes, so that everyone can be safer and able to go out on dates if they want to and stuff like that. But they have to obey our rules first. Right now, this is just kind of starting out on college campuses, but rest assured, they will try to push this kind of thing into the rest of the country if need be.
So now, wait a second, hold on. So the left is trying to say that men are physically larger and more dangerous than women.
Correct.
How does this play into the left and the social justice warriors narrative that men and women are exactly equal in every single way and everybody's the same? And are they actually saying now that women aren't as dangerous or as strong or as capable as men are? Like, what are they doing with this?
At this moment. At this moment, that's exactly what they're saying, but they'll reverse that here whenever they need to. Again, this is a narrative swapping situation. It's not about making sense, which is why we'll never get down to the bottom of this, man. All it is just narrative driving. Right now, it is dangerous for a man to ask a girl out on a date if they're larger, which most of us are larger than women. This is a biological fact. But the point is that men have to be a villain at this point in time. Later on, when they need them to, they will say that men and women are exactly the same because they want women to achieve something or get something that they think they're not getting that men are. But at this moment in time, and during this subject, men are different than women, and they are dangerous, and they need to be controlled in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, let me read you an excerpt from a question and answer session between school officials. So what's the difference between power and authority? That's the question. Answer, well, I think in certain situations that a man could have power over a woman even if there wasn't an authority situation. I think there could be a feeling of that just by the nature of your gender. Question. So this could apply to any situation with a man and any woman. It could. What's your response to that?
Again, this is just this is ridiculous. All right. They're basically saying it doesn't matter if they are in a position of authority. The fact alone is that men are authority figures, period. It is the patriarchy. Remember that. The patriarchy is in charge. The patriarchy is the problem that we're having. It causes every problem that we're having in society. That is not even remotely the case. If this is a patriarchal system, then it is a sorry patriarchal system where the courts are completely stacked against us. We're the ones who always go off to die at war. We die at work far more often. We're less. We don't really thrive as well in the college atmosphere like women do. So it's a sorry patriarchal system that we're in if that's the case. But again, it's a Saturday morning cartoon villain, the boogeyman in the closet, the monster under the bed. Patriarchy is always there to hurt people, and men are the drivers of the patriarchy. And so no matter what, The patriarchy is in charge, and men are a part of the patriarchy. So therefore, men are dangerous, always in charge, and because of that, they can enforce whatever they want to on women. We've got to remove that. We've got to make sure that men aren't as dangerous. So let's go ahead and just obey whatever the feminists say, and we'll all be good.
So now school officials are suggesting that male students should avoid asking out female students altogether. Where's this going to end?
It doesn't. I mean, it's either going to end in things like the UVA rape hoax. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but Rolling Stone published an article revolving around a claim by this woman named, quote unquote, Jackie, that wasn't her real name, where she accused an entire frat of gang raping her. And it turned out to be a complete hoax. Then you have like Mattress Girl, who made the same exact claim that she was raped. And all the people in these situations had either had their character assassinated or they actually faced punishments. The only way that this ends well is if we actually adopt a system of, look, if you get raped, please come forward. We encourage you to come forward. We want to catch these guys. But if you lie about it, you should be punished for it. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Brandon. I really appreciate you being on tonight. All right, we've got a good one for you next. Television show host Larissa Switlick is under fire for posting a picture of herself on social media holding a dead goat on a recent trip to Scotland. We'll explain why political correctness has gone too far after the break. Hit me up on Twitter at Pearson Sharp over the break, and we'll see you in a minute.
Better? Okay.
Our media madness story for tonight. YouTube show host Larissa Switlick is under fire for posting a picture of herself on social media holding a dead goat on a recent trip to Scotland. Following the backlash, Switlick could now face legal trouble in the country for firearm offenses. Has political correctness gone too far, or did Switlick cross the line with her social media post? With me now, national spokeswoman for Media Equalizer, Megan Barth. Megan, thank you for being here tonight.
Good to be with you, Pearson. Thank you.
So, just like we want people to respect our laws when we go abroad, or when they come here even, with migrants and stuff, the same applies abroad. So did Switlick break the law, or is this an overreaction from animal rights activists?
Well, it might be a combination of the both, because when we look at the Firearms Act, specifically Section 11 of the Firearms Act of 1968, that's where perhaps the Swedish officials might get involved and press charges against her and her companion, her male companion, when they went on this hunting expedition. Specific to that act, and I'll read it. It relates to borrowing and lending a firearm. And if a firearm is borrowed or lended, the lender must do two things. One, accompany that person on the hunt who borrowed the firearm. And number two, they must follow the rules of the lender's certificate. We don't know what the lender's certificate says, but I am assuming that under Section 11A, the Swedish government and the officials might get involved and press firearms charges against her for not being in the accompaniment of the lender.
So is this a blatant, glaring error on her part, or is this sort of like splitting legal hairs to get her because they don't like what she did?
I would say it's the latter. I mean, she received 20,000 or more social media comments, not very nice comments, obviously, related to the hunting of these Islay goats. It's okay, actually, it's legal to hunt goats in that region. But now, because of the backlash, the social media backlash, the Swedish government is now taking it under consideration to perhaps curb the hunting of these goats or ban it altogether.
I think you mean the Scottish government, but yeah, correct. I agree. So, I mean, the UK, Scotland, they're known for being very strict on gun rights and things like that, making it very difficult for citizens to own firearms. Should she have expected this when she went over there? I mean, is this sort of maybe she should have known this was coming?
Well, hindsight is 20/20, but as an avid hunter, as she claims to be, you should perhaps be very keen and aware and understand the laws of a foreign country when you enter that country, specific to hunting. If you're going to go over and game hunt, you have to make sure that you have followed the letter of the law. Every country, perhaps even every municipality, has some different laws related to how guns are handled, how guns are transferred, and how guns are used. But if she didn't post her social media post on Twitter and bragged about her thrill or her fun kill, I'm sure that this hunt would have gone under the radar and the Scottish officials would not have known about it.
Well, you bring up a good point there. So is this more of a case then of Switlik sort of minding her own business out there, doing something that she enjoyed, posting it on social media, and then people who didn't agree with her found her and started bullying her? So you have the left, who's very anti-bullying, coming out in droves, now bullying her because they just didn't agree with what she's doing.
Right. And if they have an issue with a goat being slaughtered, then go after the law that allows goats to be hunted. That really is their problem, is the fact that she shot a mountain goat that, is not a predator. He kind of minds his own business. There were plenty of comments that said, you were just hunting an innocent goat. Goat wasn't doing anything. And so it was more the outrage over the fact that the goat was killed and not her firearms offenses. So again, they split hairs and kind of pick and choose who they want to prosecute and according to why. And again, if they have a problem with goats being hunted, then go after those that allowed goats to be hunted in that region.
So hunting, when done legally, is actually beneficial to the environment in many cases, helping to cull overpopulated herds and things like that. When is harassment a good policy, though? So hunting is legal, and that's fine, but when is harassment ever a good idea? I mean, harassing and berating someone online because you don't agree with them, we're now saying that's more acceptable than legally pursuing a pastime.
Well, it seems to be effective, doesn't it? Because these bullying campaigns that are often using social media as the vehicle for their bullying gets the attention that they want, whether it is boycotts of Tucker Carlson's show on Fox or boycotts of Dick's Sporting Goods, specifically after the Parkland shooting, whereby they removed all semi-automatic or rather rifles, stopped gun sales, for example. So these types of bullying online tactics seem to work because they shame those in power to do something, rather than perhaps look at the core problem of the issue and try to solve that problem within that large or that overreaching issue.
Okay, so we're almost out of time here, but help me out real quick. What should people do to protect themselves from this kind of outrage culture? I mean, what are the options do they have? Just give in to the left's demands, give in to the bullying, and not post this kind of stuff online? What should people do?
Well, I'm not a fan of censorship, and I'm not a fan of self-censorship, but you have to understand the world that we're living in now, that people that are keyboard warriors that have a true disdain for conservatives and conservative pastimes like hunting, they too will become the target of these online perpetrators and a target of the left. When the left cannot argue a policy, much like hunting, for example, they will take to a tactic called the politics of personal destruction and then try to destroy your reputation, destroy your character, assassinate your character in the social media spectrum, and thereby try to silence and censor you or inhibit or prohibit your actions or your words.
All right. Thank you very much, Megan, for being with us tonight. Our final tipping point of the night. Why has the stock market been so all over the place lately? I'll tell you the answer when we come back from this short break. Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us. I'm Pearson Sharp, filling in for Liz Wheeler. The market has been all over the place this week, as many of you know, so let's talk about that. Markets lost over 2% on Monday, and Democrats rushed to claim the sky was falling in President Trump's economy. Fast forward to Wednesday, where the market rallied over 5%, posting the biggest single-day gain in history. That was followed up on Thursday as markets opened up by losing over 400 points. The turbulent back and forth seems to have caught the media off guard as they were settling in to bash the president and blame him for the nation's sudden economic woes. News networks even ran stories predicting Monday's plunge was the beginning of a major 6-month market correction. Many so-called experts drummed up by the media powerhouses this week painted a bleak picture of the economy, warning of an impending implosion. But they failed to comment on the fact that under 8 years of President Obama's policies, the Dow Jones market barely cleared 19,000 points, and that was only at the very end. In less than 2 years of President Trump's leadership, that number has repeatedly broken records, hitting an all-time high of nearly 27,000 points at the start of October. That's an unprecedented 35% gain, bringing with it record growth of businesses and new jobs, something President Obama said could never be done.
He just says, well, I'm going to negotiate a better deal. Well, how exactly are you going to negotiate that? What magic wand do you have? And usually the answer is He doesn't have an answer.
Since October, the market has lost over 3,000 points, a loss many are quick to lay at President Trump's feet. Yet President Trump is dealing with something Obama never had to: the Federal Reserve.
I think the Fed is out of control. I think what they're doing is wrong. Under the Obama administration, you had a lot of help because they had very little interest. You know, when you talk about economies, our economy is far better than that, but we're paying interest, and they weren't. They were using funny money.
Raising rates is typically something the Fed does when an economy is doing well to keep down inflation and keep prices low. In 2018 alone, the Fed has already raised interest rates 4 times, far more aggressive than at any point during Obama's presidency. In fact, it took the Fed nearly 7 years before it finally decided to raise interest rates for the first time on Obama. That policy boosted economic growth, keeping interest rates at nearly zero and ensuring cheap lending options. But even though prices rose much faster under Obama, the Fed still failed to act, leading to a bigger problem with inflation back then than we have today.
They're raising interest rates too fast because they think the economy is so good. The fact is that the economy is doing so well that they raised interest rates, and that's as a form of safety, in a way. President Obama didn't do much of that. Much easier to run when you have no interest rate. He had a very low interest rate. We have a normalized interest rate.
Headlines are also being dominated by fears the president is going to fire the Fed chairman, Jerome Powell. CNN and other outlets were whipped into a frenzy, accusing the president of trying to bully the Federal Reserve, vowing it would never cave to Trump's so-called temper tantrums. Yet former Fed chairman Alan Greenspan spoke out about the situation, saying President Trump's criticism of the Fed is actually nothing new.
I remember another president that got very angry at you it was the first President Bush.
There's been more than one.
Is this unprecedented to see President Trump jawboning the Fed about raising rates? No, but presidents don't like higher interest rates, typically.
If you go through the history of the Federal Reserve, especially in most recent years, you'll find every president has an insight into how the markets work and where interest rates ought to be, which is always superior to that of the Federal Open Market Committee.
So they think.
But did you ever get direct either letters or conversations with the occupant of the Oval Office directly on that issue?
All the time.
All the time.
And despite the media's best efforts to lay the economic turbulence at Trump's feet, experts predicted the stock market would begin to struggle if Democrats won the House in the midterms. Goldman Sachs warned a Democratic takeover would have huge impact on stocks, citing decades of evidence that a divided government is damaging to an economy. And now, with the economy showing signs of instability, President Trump's predictions seem to be coming true. Analysts aren't sure if the market is out of the woods just yet, but it seems pretty clear that President Trump's proven record of strong economic growth is a better bet for recovery than President Obama's zero interest rate training wheels from the Fed. And that's my final point. You can reach me on Twitter @PearsonSharp. If you like the show, please send me an email at onn./contact. In the meantime, catch us here tomorrow at 9 p.m. Until then, have a good night.